I am going to just focus a little bit on storytelling in business, and in particular how stories can really help bring people with them through a journey of change. I should introduce myself first. I'm Alison Esse. I'm a founder of the Storytellers. We started this business 12 years ago around my kitchen table. No clients, no products, nothing, but with a really good idea. How could we inspire people to come on a journey of change? And we knew that storytelling was a really powerful tool. Nobody was doing storytelling in business then. We were complete pioneers. And now every man and his dog is doing storytelling. Training companies, events companies, advertising agencies, brand agencies, they're all storytellers and storytelling agencies. And I can honestly say we got the name, and we got there first. So I just want to talk a little bit about the power of storytelling and why it's so important. We're at part of a post-industrialist era, and the world is full of saturated market, full of the same products and services, and it's very difficult to differentiate ourselves from one company to another. And so this idea about bringing your people are going to be your key differentiator, particularly in service-based industries. So it's really important that you can actually inspire people to come with you on a journey of change. And all companies are going through some kind of change, either driven by consumer behaviours or globalisation or technology. They're changing operating models. They're going global. There are many companies that are changing in an unprecedented kind of way. So really, it's really important to actually be able to appeal to the people who are delivering your brand promise, and help them to feel that they want to go on this journey and that they are going to be aligned to the ambition of the business and what you want to achieve. And at the Storytellers, we believe passionately that every business should have a very simple, clear and compelling, emotionally compelling corporate narrative, as a story of the journey that the business is on. They need to have an aligned leadership that are speaking as one voice, not just lots of different leaders who are all talking in a different way, but a really close-knit, visibly united leadership team. And they need to have leaders who are inspiring, who at the local level can bring their people with them on that journey of change, and have a culture of storytelling where you can share best practice, share what good looks like, and in that way inspire and motivate others to follow. And in particular, this whole thing about leadership and leaders being able to be good storytellers is about building trust and building a bond between you and an individual so that they trust you and they want to come with you on that journey. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the power of emotion, and there's no need to run out of the door because it's not a psychobabble, but the power of storytelling in actually creating an emotional connection, and the reason why emotions are so important in the way that we make our decisions and the way that we act and behave in business today. And there are a few concepts there that I'm just going to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to give you a few tips. But this is what we charge our clients rather a lot of money for. So I'm going to give you some practical hints and tips of how to construct a good story, a good corporate narrative. So you might want to get your pens out at this point. And how we can actually make it rational and an emotional journey to take your people with you on that journey of change. Before I do that, I just want to show you a short film that we made at the Story. We have a very creative team, and we as a culture change consultancy, we're quite unusual. We've got this sort of whole strategic side, but also an incredibly creative side. And we made this story. Has anybody here heard the NASA story? Yeah, it's quite a common thing. We've just created a little story to make the point about how important it is to have a really clear story to tell with a really clear vision, so that people can create a line of sight between what they're doing in the organisation and how they can contribute to success.
Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for a great new American enterprise. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
When Kennedy committed America to this audacious goal, no one could be confident that this was even possible.
No single space project will be more impressive to mankind
It would mean confronting previously unimaginable challenges.
or more important for the long-range exploration of space.
Back in 1961, NASA didn't know how to stop a space module being melted by the sun. It didn't know how to maintain radio contact over such a vast distance. And most importantly, it didn't know what it would take to get a rocket and its crew back to Earth safely. But over 400,000 people responded to Kennedy's vision, along with 20,000 manufacturing organizations and universities. This was no longer just Kennedy's story, it was the nation's story. With a problem of this complexity, NASA needed an entire movement of people. Astronauts, designers, scientists, engineers and construction workers, cleaners and administrators, united by a clear and compelling story, working together to experiment, innovate and learn. Out of this movement came an extraordinary range of new inventions. Microchips to guide the rocket back to Earth, now at the heart of every modern computer. Vital insulation to shield the module from solar radiation. They even spent several $1 million inventing the anti-gravity ballpoint pen. The single unifying force driving this team forward was the sense of connection between their day-to-day role and Kennedy's overarching vision. However small that role, their purpose and satisfaction stemmed from working together, hundreds of thousands of people contributing to something much bigger than just themselves. Determined to stay in touch with the people he'd inspired, Kennedy was walking the corridors of NASA one day. He stopped to talk to a cleaner who was meticulously sweeping the floor and asked him what he was doing. To which his legendary reply was, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." On the 20th of July 1969, an estimated 50 million viewers watched as the final chapter of the story unfolded and reached its conclusion.
Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Have a headphone awareness. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I love that story because it's just a really nice way of just saying whatever your vision and ambition for your business is, everybody has a role to play. However small, everybody has a really valuable role to play. And it's really important that everybody feels that they're heroes of the story and that their role is valued, and it will make them much more engaged in what they're doing and want to be part of it. So I'm just going to start with talking about the concept of hero or victim. And it's quite simple. When businesses are going through change, people tend to resist change because they're usually sort of quite comfortable with the status quo. They feel that change can be quite threatening, and in fact our brain only really asks two simple questions of itself: is this going to help me or is this going to hurt me? And usually, because change is uncertain and people are a little fearful of it, they feel, oh, it's going to hurt me, so I'm going to resist it. And if they can't actually control the outcome, if they can't feel that they're in control or influencing that outcome in any kind of way, they will resist it. So it's really important that we help people to feel that change is not happening to them, but they are willing participants, and you talk about participation. They are willing participants. They're going to be the heroes of change, not just victims. It's not being done to them. So it's what we at Storytellers do is help people by sharing their own stories of how they're contributing to that journey, contributing to that master narrative, the corporate narrative, to help them change victim status to hero status. And when people do change from victim status to hero status, you can actually almost palpably feel the energy and the sort of the discretionary effort that they're putting in. And so that's one concept that I just want to plant in your minds. The next concept is our inner story. We all have an inner story that has been built up since we were little children, and it's been born out of our experiences, the media, our friends, what our parents tell us, and as we grow up, we start to create these kind of neural pathways, if you like, and our heads kind of become quite cemented in terms of what we believe in, what is our actual belief, and it's very, very hard to change. And I don't know if anybody here has got teenage children, but I haven't anymore because he's grown up. But when you get to sort of 14, 15-year-olds, they just go, no, I'm not going to do anything. I know everything. You can't tell me everything. And that's actually because they're becoming saturated, these neural pathways and patterns of behaviour that they've been growing up with. And by the age of 25, it's almost impossible to actually change an adult's view. You can't tell an adult what to do. And Sir John Harvey Jones once said, you can't tell an adult what to do. You can only create an environment and allow them to discover it for themselves before they'll actually change. But you can actually change their mindset and their belief with stories. And in business, there are 5 different types of story that can help change the inner story. Collectively in business, all of those inner stories will create what we call a dominant narrative. And you can't begin to change your culture or ask people to do things differently until you change that dominant narrative. The 5 different types of stories are the business narrative, a compelling story of your journey, your ambition. We talk about leaders' stories, the stories that leaders tell about how they are bringing their people with them on that journey, and how to personalise that corporate narrative and make it relevant and meaningful for their teams. The third story is employee stories of how employees are contributing to the cause, if you like, what they are doing differently, and celebrating the heroes of the organisation through their personal stories that link back again to that master narrative. The fourth type of story is belief-building stories. You need to show reasons to believe, stories that show that not only can we do this, but we are doing it, and sharing those stories, amplifying those stories of success. And lastly, the sort of the group stories, if you like, the way we do things around here, so that you can start to embed new ways of working as your culture, the way we do things. So the inner story is really important. You've got to be able to change that inner story, that dominant story, before you can change the culture of an organisation. And the last concept, and I'm rushing through this because I really can't wait to get to the corporate narrative bit, is the concept of the elephant and the rider. You may have heard of this concept before. The elephant represents our emotions, and the rider represents our rational decision making. The elephant will always trump the rider. If there's any conflict between the emotional and the rational, the emotions will always take over. We make our decisions through the emotions that we actually feel. And this is why you can actually manipulate through storytelling how people are going to respond emotionally to something. So the elephant and the rider is a really good way of expressing how our emotions actually govern what we do. Now, when you tell someone a story, and I think Robert and Dale touched on this earlier, when you tell someone a story, one of 3 things is going to happen. They're either going to agree with you. When you tell them a fact or data, one of 3 things will happen. They'll either agree with you, or they'll disagree with you, or they won't. They'll just sit in the middle because they don't feel well enough informed. When you tell a story, 7 areas of the brain light up, because what it's activating is your senses of smell, of movement, of language processing, of colour. All sorts of different senses are aroused when you actually tell someone a story. You're not conscious of it, but you are imagining, you're putting yourself in the place of that person who's playing out that story. So at the same time, certain chemicals are being released. Cortisol, which actually makes us pay attention. dopamine and oxytocin, a nice shot of those is actually rushing through your heads, which actually creates a sense of empathy and positive feeling. So if you're a leader and you tell a story to your people, preferably a story that involves an element of struggle or endeavour, because no one wants to hear how fantastic I am as a leader, but a leader who's going to say, do you know something was really hard to get here? Telling a story, you are empathetic, and that builds trust. And that's what leaders want. They want their people to trust them so that then they can take them on this journey of change. So it's really important that leaders can tell those personal stories that are going to instill a sense of trust and belief that we can go with this person, we trust them, and so on and so forth. So there is a neuroscience to storytelling. It's not just a fad. But there is a really physiological way of a reason why stories can actually start to persuade people to change direction. And as I said, you can start to manipulate in the nicest possible way the way that people act and behave. And lastly, as Dale mentioned earlier, we have a unique ability as humans to make connections. We don't act on isolated facts. What we do is we form a story around it in our heads. Again, it's a subconscious story, but it's a story. So it's really important that you fill that vacuum with a really compelling story that people can sign up to and feel that they're going to be the heroes playing out this story of change. And of course, as we all know, stories can actually create an emotional connection because they win hearts and minds. And I'm going to tell a story in a minute about a particular story somebody told from a client of ours, which had the most amazing effect on the organisation. So, what does a corporate narrative look like? Well, it looks something like this. This is in its very black and white generic stage. We have a 6-chapter framework at the Storytellers, which we developed. 7 chapters doesn't work, 5 chapters doesn't work. We've even tried 11, it just doesn't work. 6, just trust me, 6 is the magic number. And what we're going to do here is actually create a rational and an emotional journey or flow that articulates our brand, our vision, our mission, our values, our strategy, all of those disparate, all of those initiatives, all of those different parts, the big challenge that we're facing, our strategic priorities. It encapsulates them into a really simple narrative that everybody can understand and believe in, and they can follow it because it has a rational and emotional flow. So the first chapter is about pride and purpose. We start off with pride and purpose to start people off in a good place. It's a warm place, it's a fuzzy place, it's a reminder of why we're here and what we stand for as a business beyond making money. Because let's face it, we particularly the younger generation, they're very interested in the purpose of an organisation and a values-led organisation. And then we take people from that lovely warm place into the ice-cold water dip, which is often called the current reality. And the current reality is really important in a story like this because you've got to appeal to the cynics and the skeptics in an organisation. This is not a story of rhetoric, it's a story that people can relate their own emotions and their own experiences to. So in any corporate narrative, those leaders, and because we construct this by interviewing the executive teams of each business, that current reality is the antagonist of the story. It's the big but. It's the kind of the brutally honest facts that possibly nobody really wants to hear, but you've got to put it in there because otherwise people won't believe you. It's not credible, it's not honest. So the current reality has got to be a really honest articulation of what we're really up against and why. And then we take them back out and back into the big opportunity. And that could be about scale, it could be about our brand, it could be about a gap in the market, but it's a reason to believe that this journey is worth going on. And that opportunity is something that brings hope from a little place of potential darkness in the previous chapter. We then look at the strategy, the high-level strategy of where we want to go and where we are now. So it's kind of in very, very simple terms, the journey we need to make to get there. And then chapter 5 is the call to action. Every story needs a call to action. You are trying to get people to believe they're going to be heroes on this journey, and they're not going to be heroes if they're just bystanders looking in on it. So you need to be able to start to perhaps evaluate, what our behaviours need to be, what the personal role and contribution everybody can play, whether you're a receptionist or whether you're a chief executive. So, for example, relentless customer focus. So that means that even a secretary in a marketing department can be somehow, in her own small way or his own small way, relentlessly customer focused. But these need to be actionable things that people can relate to and they can actually physically do. So they won't be about things like profit, because those are out of the control of everyone. But it could be about collaboration, it could be about efficiency, and it's just something that people can actually translate and interpret in a way that's going to resonate with them. And then the final chapter is the desired destination. What will success look like? What is our vision for the future? And what if we go on this journey and we all act and behave in this particular way because of the strategy, because of the current reality, what is the world going to be saying about our company, or what will the company be saying about our division in the company in 3 to 5 years' time? And while we're all doing all of this, back at the Storytellers, our head of inspiration is actually creating a really powerful visual identity that you can start to now, you won't be able to read the words on this, but those generic chapter headings have morphed into, this is for Greater Manchester Police, have morphed into Greater Manchester Police specific headlines, and then a very, very simple narrative that runs from chapter to chapter that takes you through where we are now, what the big challenge is, and so on and so forth. And this gives you a really useful set of visual assets that you can then use to link all of your future messages back to the story. But the beautiful thing about this story is that it's really just 6 buckets that everybody can start to make sense of those, those initiatives that we bombard our organisations with, and all the messaging and the values, and then we've got a launch of the brand, but here people can start to place them within these chapters, and if it doesn't fit somewhere in this story, then we shouldn't be doing it. So it becomes a really useful management tool. And we have clients that say that they have managed to change in 4 months their entire culture because everybody is aligned behind this story, and we show leaders how they can then personalise the story and bring it to life for their teams. But it's a way of actually checking and referencing back, is this decision in service of this story? And if it's not, we shouldn't be doing it. And it means that you can really dramatically accelerate the pace of change in these organisations. These CEOs have not got time to muck about. We've just done a piece of research at the Storytellers that actually says that 76% of business leaders believe that if they don't get their customer focus right, that their businesses will not exist in 2 years' time. Well, that means they've got to hurry up and do something about it. We asked them another question, what are you doing about it? And they said it's not a priority. I mean, it is bizarre. It is absolutely bizarre. But that's for next year, and you'll probably all hear about it. But this corporate story can actually dramatically accelerate the pace of change because people are aligned behind every little decision they make, every behaviour they exhibit, everything they do. It has to be in service of this story. And with this client who it was a big telco company, Colts Technology Services. They said that when they went out to they have 15 European countries, and the work councils, you have to negotiate. It's quite tricky negotiating with work councils, particularly in France. I hope there are no French people here, but it's tricky. And they said that they got those work councils on board with this consistently because everybody was telling the same story. It was something that they didn't deviate from. It's not a PowerPoint deck where you can take out slide number 87 because it's not relevant to me. If you take out any of these chapters, the story doesn't flow. So this provides context for everything we're doing in the organisation. And when it comes to this chapter here, this call to action, what we ask leaders to do is to start to have conversations with their teams around what are we doing in our part of the business to make a difference, and how can we share the stories of success. And I just want to share, just before I finish, a little story from Intercontinental Hotels. We work with all but huge companies. The more complex, the better. But they tend to be multinational companies, and you'd recognise all of the brands. We were launching their story. Their 6-chapter story is the big backdrop at their big annual conference. There were 350 leaders in the room, mostly male, and it was a very big event for them. And it was in the States. And one of their priorities in chapter 5, that call to action, was show we care. It's quite important you use language that isn't corporate speak. So show we care about our guests. And so we had the microphone and we were passing it around. Has anyone got a story about how we care for our customers? Just to get people revved up. I think we were talking about the Pride and Purpose chapter. And this guy took the microphone, big American guy, and he came out from the back of them, and he was obviously very nervous. And he told this story about how he ran this hotel. I can't remember what brand it was, but it was one of the Intercontinental Group's hotels, and it was located next to a medical centre. And he said there was a father and his son who came to the medical centre quite regularly. It was clear that the little boy wasn't very well. And the staff got to know him. He was coming week after week after week, and they were staying in this hotel. And one evening they were having their dinner, and the staff were chatting to him, and he sent this little boy up to bed. He was 12 years old, and he called the head waiter over, and he said, "I just want to let you know that my son is starting a really aggressive course of chemotherapy tomorrow. And he's really self-conscious, and he doesn't want to go through the whole losing his hair bit. So he's going to shave his hair off tonight. So, first day of treatment, just get it out of the way." And he said, "And because I'm his dad," I still get goosebumps when I tell the story, "because I'm his dad and I love him," he said, "I'm going to shave my head as well. So when we come down to breakfast tomorrow, could you not make a scene? Could you not make a fuss? Because this little boy is going to be a bit embarrassed. So, let's just pretend nothing's happened." So the head waiter was, he was gutted because he's got to know this little boy well. And he said, "No problem at all. That's fine." Went off up to bed, came down for breakfast, baseball caps, shaved heads, and nobody batted an eyelid. All of the waiting staff just carried on as normal. But 4 of the staff had shaved their heads overnight. And when this guy, the point of telling that story is because suddenly those words, "show we care," have got a human life at the end of it. And suddenly the weight of those words is so much more important than we must demonstrate excellent customer service. It's really about telling human stories that people can relate to. Everybody, a lot of people have got children or whatever. It's something that they can empathise with, and they can really feel for that family. So when he told that story, he was in floods of tears, this guy. He was really embarrassed. And the whole of the room, 350 people, were all, I'm fine, I'm really fine. But they were all very choked up. And that story about the shaved heads went through Intercontinental hotels like wildfire, because it's an interesting story, and it was just something that people could repeat easily, and it just got that message across about show we care in a really human and really caring kind of way. And suddenly, and those are why stories can bring these quite abstract concepts to life with a human life at the end of it. And it doesn't matter what kind of business it is, at the end you've all got customers. That's why we exist. And therefore there are human beings at the end of the chain. Even if you're a construction company, you're building these buildings for, to create better education establishments, or maybe libraries or hospitals or whatever it might be. But there's always a human life at the end of it. And we work with big businesses like Pfizer. We work with every possible industry sector. There is always a human at the end of it. So that's why we try and connect what people are doing in their business to the human element of change. And that, in a whistle-stop tour, is, I could talk for hours on this, but that really, I hope, has given you an idea of why stories are so important in business, how you can create a story out of your strategy, your strategic narrative, and how you can actually start to populate stories, and why neuroscience, why it's actually going to make a difference. That's it from me.
Right, thank you very much.